Alright folks, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another 2 or 3 videos with the basic quantifier structure, and then I'm going to switch over to making a few that are going to go through sentences that have the relational video, or the relational quantifier structure. So if you haven't taken a look at the crash course videos that I put up, I'd recommend looking at those. Those go through kind of the intentionality of approaching how to diagram and write out these sentences. However, this is just me going through and literally doing that for every single sentence. So I'm going to do the rest of these 2 pages or 3 pages, and then I'm going to hop over to the relational one, since you do need to be able to do ones with relational quantifiers as well. So let's take a look at this sentence. A thing is a cat only if it is an animal. The first thing that we want to do is we want to identify any type of operators that we have, and it's worth noting that we have an only if statement. Only if means that we're going to have some type of arrow, and it's going to be an arrow that goes in that direction, because only if does not equal if. Then we can label our pieces. We're talking about cats, category of cat, the category of animal. And then also note that we're talking about a thing, so this is going to be an existential claim. There exists an X such that. Actually, this is going to be a universal claim. I take it back. Because it's talking about a certain type of thing that obtains over all animals that are cats. So what we'd write here is we would write for all of X, if X is a cat, then it is an animal. We could also write that it's not the case that there exists an X such that X is both a cat and not an animal. Let's go on to 2. So we should note that we're talking about some, so this is going to be an existential X. Then we're talking about people, PX, and wicked things. Specifically, we're saying that there are some things that are both people and wicked at the same time. So this is going to take an existential. There exists an X such that X is both a person and X is wicked. Going on to 3, some diseases are not fatal. Since we have a sum, this is going to be an existential X, and then we have 2 categories. We have the category of diseases, dx, the category being fatal, fx, and we also have a negation, the not. For translation, this is going to be another existential X. There exists an X such that something is both a disease and not fatal. There's an alternative translation for this. We could alternatively also say, it is not the case for all of X that if X is a disease, then X is going to be fatal. Going on to 4, every logic student is wise. Since we have an every, we're going to be talking about all X. And then for L, what we see is we have logic student, and this is going to be together as Lx, and then we have wisdom, which is going to be wise, Wx. So since we have a universal, we're going to start off with the universal X. For all of X, if X is a logic student, then it follows that X is wise. You could also do this as a existential claim. You could also say it is not the case that there exists an X such that X is both a logic student and not wise. More complicated, but for some folks that might stick. Going on to 5, no soldier is a sailor. So we have a not claim, and it's going to be a not universal. We have soldiers, we have sailors. Now the question here is going to be where to put the negation, because the negation actually can't go with the universal right there. So we're going to give 2 different translations. One way of translating this would be to say, for all of X, if X is a soldier, then X is not a sailor. The other way would be to say it's not the case that there exists an X such that X is both a soldier and a sailor at the same time. Both of those would work. Going on to 6, we see an only. If we see an only, think of this as an only if. This means that we're going to have some type of arrow somewhere. Then we have animals and wolves. So the question here would be, would we have an existential or a universal or an existential? And my recommendation here would be you could choose which one. Most folks are probably going to go with the universal. And this would translate as, for all of x, if x is a wolf, then x is an animal. Or, it's not the case that there exists an x such that x is both a wolf and not a mammal, or not an animal at the same time. Going on to 7, everything. Everything means we're talking about definitely all of x. And then for illusion, we just have ix. So if we're saying that everything is illusion, for all things, all x's are illusions. In contrast, in number 8, we have a not everything. Everything is still going to be universal. We still have illusions as a category, and we have a not. So not everything. If not everything is an illusion, we could write in two ways. We could write it's not the case that all of x is an illusion, or we could write that there exists some x such that x is not an illusion. Both of these would work just fine. So now we're getting to ones that are a little bit more complex. So either something is an illusion or nothing is an illusion. So notice that we have a operator here. It's going to be a wedge. So let's do the pieces. If we were to write something is an illusion, well, we have illusions. Something, there exists an x, nothing. For all of x, it is not the case that. And then once we do those pieces individually, we'll be able to wedge them together with a disjunct. So something is an illusion. There exists an x such that x is an illusion. Nothing is an illusion. For all of x, x is not an illusion. And then we just put a disjunct in between those two pieces. Nothing is right unless it is not wrong. Remember, for unlesses are wedges. So this one's going to be a little bit confusing, possibly, depending on where we put certain operators, but let's also notice that we're talking about nothing. So we're actually talking about everything, and we're going to say that everything is not something. In this case, everything is either not right, or it is not wrong. Then if we were to write it out, for all of x, x is either not right, or it is not wrong. You could also, and this is a little bit weird because you're using a wedge instead of an arrow, you could write it like this, for all of x. If x is right, then it's not wrong. That would also work. Now going on to 11, we see that we have some specific people. We're talking about Aristotle, we're talking about Boole, we're talking about the category logicians, and we're talking about another category of logicians. And we also have an if-then statement. So we're going to have an arrow in there somewhere. So I would say let's take the there are no logicians as its own claim. So this would be an existential x, and that there doesn't exist something that's a logician. And then we're going to take this side as particulars. Let's start writing it out. Neither Aristotle nor Boole is a logician. So it's not the case that Aristotle is a logician, or that Boole is a logician. We could also write it as not LA and not LB. That would also work. Then it's not the case that there exists an x such that x is a logician. And this would be the same on this side. You could also write this part right here as for all of x, x is not a logician. That also works. So this one especially is just depending on what makes sense for you and resonates for translations. Some, but not all, paintings are forgeries. So my recommendation would be to take it in pieces. Let's do the some paintings are forgeries part, and then let's do the not all paintings are forgeries, and put that together with an ampersand. So we have our category of paintings, our category of being a forgery, and we also have an existential X that some are, and we also have a not all. So let's do some paintings or forgeries. There exists an X such that X is both a painting and X is a forgery. And, because buts are translated as ampersands, and it is not the case for all of X that if X is a painting, then it is necessarily a forgery. Going on to 13, what we see is we have an if-then statement. So what we want to do is we want to take the pieces and translate them independently first, and then add in an arrow. So let's translate everything, all X is mental, mx, and nothing, all of X is not physical. You could also put this as not existential X, whichever works for you. So let's translate everything as mental. X, mx. Nothing is physical. For all of X, X is not physical. If everything is mental, then nothing is physical. And that's how we would translate this one. And then one of the questions folks might have is whether or not you need to use a different letter here. You could also write Y, negation PY. So you could switch up what little letter you're using. Let's keep going to 14. If nothing is mortal, then nothing is human. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to translate the nothing is mortal part, and we're going to translate the nothing is human part independently of one another. So nothing, all of X is not. Then we have mortal as a category. Nothing, all of X is not. Then we have human as a category. So if nothing is mortal, for all of X is not mortal. Nothing is human. For all of Y, Y is not human. And then add an arrow for the if-then statement. You could also translate these as not the case that there exists an X such that X is mortal, or not the case that there exists a Y such that Y is human. Those are also equivalent and acceptable translations. If everyone is sad, then no one is happy. So again, we're going to translate the everyone is sad part, and then we're going to translate the no one is happy part. So we have happiness, no one, not the case that there exists a Y or exists an X such that everyone is sad, all of X is sad, SX. Then we're going to go back and do the if-then later. So everyone is sad. For all of X, X is sad. No one is happy. It's not the case that there exists a Y such that Y is happy. Then we add in the arrow for the if-then part. 16 is pretty close. If anyone, if there's even one person, one existential X that is sad, then he or she, so we're going to be talking about the same person here, is not happy. I'm going to do anyone. Let's do anyone as a universal. It's easier to translate that one. So if anyone person is sad, then he or she is not happy. So for all of X, if X is sad, then it follows that. Well, actually, it's going to be that if X is sad and X is a person, then it follows that X is not happy. Let's keep going. So if Cuddleworth is a logician and all logicians are bores, then he is a bore. So we're going to see that we have an if-then statement going on. So we're going to have some type of arrow. We have an and, so we're going to have an ampersand. We have an all, LX, being bores. So we're going to translate that all on its own. Then we have Cuddleworth as a logician. So we have little c for Cuddleworth, category of logician. And then he is a bore. He, little c Cuddleworth, is a bore. So let's start with Cuddleworth as a logician. That's going to be LC. And all logicians, for all of X, if X is a logician, then X is a bore. And if this entire statement is true, then it follows that Cuddleworth is a bore. So what I did in this video is I went through an additional 17 or so types of translations that have quantifiers. You are going to have these types of questions on your exam, so do practice them.